Have you ever thought about which European countries might be facing challenges in 2025? Consider the big economies like Germany, the UK, or even Ukraine. Or perhaps it could be a place you wouldn't expect at all. The future is shaping up to be quite an adventure, and we're ready to explore the astonishing, unexpected, and truly eye-opening stories from these countries. From political upheaval to economic hurdles, these nations are encountering challenges that might alter the course of their futures. Get comfortable because you won't want to miss which country claims the top spot. Stay tuned to see who's next on this thrilling journey. Before we dive in, it would be awesome if you could like and subscribe. Make sure to stick around until the end. All right, let's get started. Number 10, France, has a long history of being a revolutionary nation, but it may be on the verge of another revolution due to political upheaval and economic hardships. France has been severely impacted by the global economic downturn, and its public debt is soaring. In 2023, the country's debt to GDP ratio was an astounding 115%, which is dangerously high for any nation. This enormous debt is depleting the nation's finances and restricting the government's ability to invest in infrastructure, healthcare, and education. Inflation is another problem that has been steadily rising, reaching 5.6% in 2023. Ordinary people are struggling, particularly because their wages aren't keeping up. But the political climate is the major worry because there is a growing sense of dissatisfaction. Whether it's about government corruption or pension reforms, there are public protests almost every day. In 2023 alone, there were over 300 protests calling for change, and youth unemployment is another major issue, at 20%. This is leaving a generation of young people with few opportunities and making them disillusioned with the political system. When you add in the effects of climate change, such as flooding and heat waves that damage infrastructure and agriculture, it's evident that France is facing a tidal wave of problems. If these issues are not resolved by 2025, France may experience a political collapse and a severe economic downturn, making it one of the most affected countries in Europe. Number 9, Germany. We all know it as the powerhouse of Europe, right? But wait, things are changing quickly, and it's not looking too bright. First of all, Germany is facing a demographic challenge as the country's population is aging at a significant rate. By 2035, experts predict that almost 40% of Germans will be over the age of 50, which means there will be fewer workers in the labor force. Germany's economy relies heavily on its exports, especially to China and Russia, but the war in Ukraine and rising tensions between China and the West are complicating matters. Additionally, the country is grappling with a major energy crisis. As you may know, Germany has depended significantly on Russian natural gas, and since the war began, those supplies have been cut off. Energy prices surged by 50% in just 1 year, impacting everyone from businesses to households. And let's not overlook inflation. In 2023, inflation in Germany rose to 7.2%, which is a considerable challenge for everyday people. To make matters worse, it's concerning to see that youth unemployment is on the rise, with nearly 10% of young people struggling to find jobs. This certainly creates a challenging situation for everyone involved. If Germany is unable to address its aging population issue and stabilize its economy, it could face some challenges by 2025. The economy might shrink, and there could be an increase in protests against the government, leading to social unrest. Germany might face some challenges with its infrastructure if these issues aren't addressed directly. Number 8, Poland, which has had significant growth in recent decades, may soon face a major collapse if conditions don't change. Poland's economy has grown impressively, but it is now experiencing significant political unrest that is beginning to catch up with it. The ruling Law and Justice Party has come under fire for allegedly undermining democratic institutions through contentious media and judiciary reforms. These actions have caused serious tensions with the European Union, which is now threatening to withhold vital funding as of 2023. Poland's economy is heavily dependent on exports, particularly to its neighbors. But the global economy is beginning to slow down, which could have a significant impact on Poland's growth in 2023. Additionally, Poland received more than 70 billion euros from the EU's recovery fund. but that could be at risk if political relations worsen. Poland's GDP grew at a rate of 4.9%, which is fantastic. But if the world economy deteriorates in 2025, Poland's growth may slow down considerably. Meanwhile, income inequality is rising, and unemployment is a major issue, particularly for young people, with 10% of the population finding work. In addition, Poland's political and economic landscape is becoming unstable. And if it is unable to manage these issues effectively, it may face a collapse of its political system and a significant economic downturn that would put it in a vulnerable position within Europe. Number 7, Italy, is another powerful European nation, but regrettably, it is having difficulty surviving. Italy is known for its pasta, art, and fashion, but it also has significant political and economic difficulties. First, let's examine Italy's debt. By 2023, the country's national debt had risen to over $3 trillion, or roughly 135% of GDP. This is a significant burden. But the issue is that although the nation has managed to survive for decades, with such high debt, interest payments are now depleting its resources, making it more difficult to invest in infrastructure, healthcare, and education. However, debt is not Italy's only issue. By 2025, Italy's workforce will be among the oldest in the world, which means fewer people will be working, paying taxes, and contributing to the nation's growth. In fact, Italy's birth rate has been declining steadily for years, and it is currently among the lowest in Europe at just 1.3 children per woman. This is a challenging issue that is endangering Italy's economy, but it doesn't end there. Italy's unemployment rate is also startlingly high. Roughly 30% of young Italians are unemployed, and many of them feel as though there are no more opportunities. Add this to the country's reliance on the faltering tourism sector and a decline in manufacturing, and you can see why Italy's economy is on the verge of collapse in 2025. If nothing changes, Italy may face both a political and financial crisis. Number 6, Spain. Spain is a stunning country with a thriving culture, but underneath the surface, economic problems are beginning to emerge. As we all know, the pandemic severely damaged the country's tourism industry in 2023, and while it partially recovered, it hasn't returned to its pre-pandemic levels. The problem is that Spain has many other issues that make it vulnerable, such as youth unemployment, which is 40%, one of the highest in Europe. When nearly half of the country's youth are unemployed, it leads to social unrest, which is already beginning to manifest itself in the form of strikes and anti-government protests. Spain has been dealing with austerity measures for years, and the cost of living is rising. The country's public debt is also increasing, reaching 120% of GDP. In Catalonia, where pro-independence demonstrations are common, the Spanish government is likewise finding it difficult to meet the demands of regional independence movements. All of these problems are beginning to pile up, and if Spain's government is unable to manage them, the country may face a political crisis in 2025 that would further harm its economy and cause severe economic stagnation or perhaps the fall of its current political structure. Number 5, Ukraine. The conflict with Russia has left Ukraine's economy in ruins, and it will take decades for the nation to recover. Ukraine has been through a lot and is still struggling to survive one of the most catastrophic wars in modern history. In 2022 alone, the nation's GDP shrank by over 30%, which is a devastating blow. The conflict has devastated large areas of infrastructure, such as highways, bridges, and power plants, and more than 8 million Ukrainians have fled the nation. However, these funds are not a permanent solution, and Ukraine's reliance on foreign aid makes it extremely vulnerable. Even if the war ends in the coming years, Ukraine's economy will take a long time to recover. The Ukrainian government is heavily dependent on international aid, with the United States, European Union, and other Western nations providing billions of dollars in military and humanitarian support. By 2023, Ukraine had received over $50 billion in foreign aid. The amount of the nation's public debt is already concerning. More than 80% of GDP, and it will cost hundreds of billions of dollars to repair the nation's infrastructure. While Ukraine's political structure is still unstable and corruption is still an issue, the energy industry has been decimated, with numerous power plants either damaged or destroyed, resulting in severe power outages. International assistance is still crucial. It is unclear how Ukraine will recover. If the conflict continues or if the nation cannot successfully reconstruct, Ukraine may face economic collapse by 2025. Number 4, Hungary. Although Hungary has experienced comparatively steady growth in recent years, its political environment and economic difficulties are laying an unstable foundation for the future. To start, Hungary's relationship with the European Union is strained. This country has been in the news lately for all the wrong reasons. Hungary is in a precarious position because it depends heavily on EU funding to support its economy. Prime Minister Viktor Orban has come under fire for undermining democratic institutions, restricting press freedom, and consolidating power. The EU has already threatened to withhold funding if Hungary doesn't meet certain political and economic standards. Now, let's talk about the economic side of things. Hungary's GDP grew by just 1.5% in 2023, far less than its neighbors. The country's inflation rate is almost 10%, which is driving up living expenses while salaries haven't kept up. Additionally, youth unemployment is on the rise, with 15% of young people having difficulty finding employment. The nation is largely reliant on foreign investments, especially in sectors like the automobile manufacturing industry. Although these investments are with the slowing global economy, BEC is growing increasingly unclear. The labor market in Hungary is likewise dealing with a significant problem: a population decline. Given that Hungary's birth rate is less than 1.5 children per woman, fewer people will be joining the workforce, and the population will be getting older. If Hungary is unable to adapt to these changes by 2025, it may experience political instability and economic stagnation that could jeopardize its stability. With such high debt levels and a politically divided society, Hungary may face a collapse that would undermine both its economic growth and democratic integrity. Number 3, Greece has a long and interesting history, but its future doesn't look very bright. You may remember that the country almost went bankrupt in 2009 because of its debt crisis. Even though the European Union and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, have helped Greece recover, it's still having a hard time. Greece has one of the highest levels of national debt in Europe, at over 180% of its GDP. This huge debt load is still putting a lot of pressure on Greece's economy, making it one of the most fragile countries in Europe in recent years. Greece's GDP growth has been at best modest, and in 2023 it was just above 1%. This is a far cry from the strong growth that some of its neighbors are having. In the meantime, unemployment is still a big problem in Greece, especially among young people. The youth unemployment rate is a shocking 30%. And because there aren't many job opportunities, many young Greeks are leaving the country to find better opportunities abroad. This brain drain, which means the country is losing its smartest and most talented people, is making the economy worse. Greece is also facing a big problem with the home market. Particularly in well-known cities like Athens and Thessaloniki, property prices have been rising, and rent is getting more expensive. Actually, more than 40% of Greek households spend on housing than 30% of their income. For low-income households and young people especially, this has made life very difficult. Many Greeks are impoverished, and social upheaval is becoming more frequent as people take to the streets to oppose the government's handling of the economy. Rising cost of living coupled with stagnant salaries is now making many Greeks unable to afford a place to live. Greece's problems do not stop there, though. The public sector is overflowing with many employees still profiting from unsustainable pay and pensions. While considerable development has been made in sectors like tourism and shipping, Greece's infrastructure remains antiquated and in great demand of investment. These industries by themselves won't be sufficient to rescue Greece out of its economic crisis. The nation depends too much on outside money, and with EU austerity policies still under effect, it has a difficult future. What then does the future hold for Greece? Well, it is somewhat doubtful if Greece cannot find a means to lower its debt, generate more employment, and strengthen its economy and risk a significant economic collapse by 2025. Greece could find itself sliding even more into an economic catastrophe that is difficult to recover from due to the country's political deadlock and unstable finances, unless major reforms are done. Number 2, Netherlands. Moving on to the Netherlands, a nation renowned for its stability and economic prosperity, even the Dutch are vulnerable to the challenges that lie ahead in 2025. The Dutch economy has been expanding gradually, but there are a number of indicators that the economy is slowing down, which might cause the nation to plunge into economic depression. The Netherlands' housing crisis is the real problem. In 2023, there were over 200,000 people waiting for affordable housing in the country, and the situation is only getting worse. The country's housing market is extremely tight, with many people unable to find a place to live, especially in big cities like Amsterdam and Rotterdam. First off, inflation in the Netherlands hit a record high that reached over 6% in 2023. While this may not seem like much compared to some other countries, it's a significant burden for the average Dutch citizen. Growing disparities and social discontent. Although the Dutch economy has historically been seen as robust and resilient, these underlying issues could create a perfect storm. If these problems aren't addressed by 2025, the Netherlands may face not only an economic collapse, but also a social breakdown, as protests and civil unrest increase. Additionally, the political environment is becoming more polarized due to protests against the government's handling of housing and other economic issues. Additionally, the Netherlands is under pressure from the EU to reduce its carbon emissions, which could lead to further economic challenges for industries like agriculture and transportation. Number 1, United Kingdom. And lastly, the nation at the top of our list, the United Kingdom. Although the UK used to be seen as a political and economic leader, it is currently dealing with some significant issues. The effects of Brexit are still being felt, and the UK economy has been hit harder than expected in many ways. In fact, GDP growth has been consistently low since the vote, and the national debt has risen to over 100% of GDP. Meanwhile, inflation has reached a 40-year high in 2023, and rising energy and food prices are placing a heavy burden on household budgets. However, the UK's issues aren't limited to money. The Bank of England was compelled to hike interest rates, which is making mortgages more expensive and driving more people into debt. Growing political unrest. In 2023, there were widespread protests throughout the UK over austerity measures, public services cuts, and the handling of the cost of living crisis. Additionally, the government has experienced numerous leadership changes in recent years, and the political divide between pro- and anti-Brexit factions has deepened, creating gridlock in Parliament. Additionally, by 2025, almost 1/4 of the UK population will be over 65, which is causing the workforce to shrink. Rising pension costs and a general slowdown in the economy might lead to economic collapse and possible civil upheaval by 2025. If the UK is unable to manage its post-Brexit economy, address rising inequality, and solve the escalating political instability,